guys. They do magic. They are the Magic Guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 195 of the Magic Guys. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Lex Luthor. Over to my right, we got Nick K.
Hi, I'm Lex Luthor. Welcome to the show, friends. And to my left is my favorite minion, Josh DeVito.
Is Lex Luthor number 2. I love it. Good to see everyone. Yes, I'm Josh DeVito, and we are the magicians paving the way to share our lives as professional magicians, answer your questions, and all around have fun and shenanigans. And sometimes we have guests on, really cool guests. And we were just talking about myself and then Nick and our guest look like a progressive timeline if you were to stay at home forever. So my beard is small, Nick's getting there, getting the length, and then wait to see our guest. That's when you know how wise you are, is the length of your beard. Anyway, Nick, how are you? How are you today?
I'm doing great, buddy. I'm sure everyone's super excited to actually not only see what our gorgeous guest and his magnificent beard look like, but actually hear what he has to say. So I say we jump straight into it and talk about a whole bunch of fun, shall we?
Heck yeah. Let's do it.
Friends, our guest is known as Australia's honest con man. He is one of the most important people in my magic career. He's been responsible for so many opportunities that I've had. He's not only an amazing magician, he's also the author of many books, one of which I'm holding, which is Chasing the Aces. He'll tell you all about that in just a moment's time. The man is a one-man orgy. There's very little he can't do. So please join me in welcoming Australia's honest con man, Mr. Nicholas J. Johnson. Welcome, Nicholas J. Johnson. Please tell our friends and guests, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Nicholas J. Johnson, and I'm a professional bullshit artist.
Excellent. Let's go. Just keeping it real.
So, Nick, if you were wondering why we brought you here today, is because most recently our good friend Josh, he wrapped up last week's episode and we're super excited for him. He had literally said, "Oh, I've got an upcoming international gig. We're super excited for it." Sad thing was, it was actually a scam. And Josh made a YouTube video about it. And so, Josh, tell him what happened.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it is a sore point trying to put it behind me. But you know what's better is talking about it on the pod. No, we did plan this. So, I made a video about this on YouTube. I think it's worth sharing, even though, I look a bit silly. And I got an inquiry from an overseas client, which I just done a gig in Singapore a few months back. So it's not unusual for me to feel like this is normal. And client spoke very great lingo in terms of events. I'd done my Googling. Their email came from the same email as the website. So it just everything looked as it should. I sent them my fee. They agreed upon it, which, excites you, and everything was fine. They sent me a contract. And this is where I'm like telling my partner, I'm like, oh yeah, look, in February, we're going to be going overseas. Let's start organizing the dog sitter and all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking at the contract and it just has this little detail, which is, look, we'll help you. Obviously, we'll pay for your airfares and all that kind of stuff. But there's just one, thing you need because, when you travel, you need a visa, whether it's a work visa or whatever. But they had this other thing called a bond authorization form, bond authorization insurance. And they're like, if you don't have it, here's the travel agent we work with. It's very fast at getting them for people. And long story short, they wanted me to send $1,000 for this bond that you get back once you leave the country, and it assures the country that this is all not even true. But what they're saying is it ensures the country that you have money to fund yourself while you're there, and you're not going to try and stay longer and work and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, they were so convincing, and it wasn't until I had to just stop and go, hang on, a client would never ask you to pay money, and what country needs you to pay a bond? Like, they would be doing this millions of times a year. It turned out to be false. But up until that point, I was really hooked in, and I just don't want to see other magicians fall for that, especially if you were to pay it, and God knows what else could happen if you did. So that was my experience. Kind of funny to come out of it. You know, I'm a little bit wiser now, and hopefully you guys are too. But it was a very smart con that isn't a normal red flag. When you see the email, you know it's not legit. It really took 2 weeks of conversating with them for something to really prick up. So yeah, so that's why we thought we'd get the expert on in this field. He understands the psychology of, you know, how people can get sucked in. So Nicholas, I'll open up the floor to you. Like, when you hear something like that, what sort of springs to mind maybe that the human mind does when getting pulled into a scam like that?
So the first thing I noticed is you didn't get scammed, and there was nothing. There were really no red flags until they started asking you to pay this dodgy fee, and that's when you went, "Oh, this sounds like a scam." So, you know, it doesn't sound like you did anything wrong or anything silly or made any sort of cognitive errors at any point. You were presented with an opportunity. You did what, you know, your due diligence, like you said. You checked that, yep, this is all legit, this is all real. And then the moment there was a red flag to be spotted, you spotted it. The reason this type of scam normally works, this is called advanced fee fraud, which is essentially pay us a small fee now and you'll get a larger reward later on. The reason why it usually works is, one, there's the promise of a reward. So this small amount of money that you're going to be paying is just a tiny obstacle to get over. But also because there's a real sunk cost for you. So you, like you said, have spent 2 weeks talking to these people. You've put all of this effort in already. And so you're basically now looking for the money. And the idea of then saying, actually, this is a scam and these people have wasted my time, is sometimes it's easier for our brains to go, I'm not going to think about that because I've already invested all of this time into it. And what will often happen is that sunk cost will then become, oh, you paid your $400 fee. That's great. But you also have to pay now this $5,000 fee. And there's numbers, they'll just keep asking you for money. And it will keep going up until eventually you don't have any more money or you stop paying. And I mean, it sounds like you got in at the ground floor and shut it down before anything happened.
Thank God. I mean, thank God. I mean, the artist in me, like you just said, knowing that you're going to get paid this lump sum as soon as you have this tiny detail, ropes you in. Is that also how people get, quote unquote, like catfished when they're talking to someone that's not real and they're asking to be sent money? And even though one side of your brain probably realizes it's not real, the other side just wants to, like, you're so far into it now, you just keep going? Or
yeah, absolutely. I always think about it, particularly what you're talking about there is like a romance scam. So when it isn't a gig, it's a relationship. And people always say, I don't understand how these people don't realize they're in a fake relationship. Or they say, I don't realize why they sort of, once they've been told they're in a fake relationship, often the people just don't believe it and refuse to accept it. And I always say, well, it's not a fake relationship. It's a real relationship. It's 100% real. You know, these feelings are real. The way you imagine this person is real. It's all entirely real. So I reckon it's easier in that context to think about it like an abusive relationship. You're in a real relationship, but it's with someone who is abusing you. They're lying to you. They're cheating. They're trying to take your money. It's financial abuse. And if you think about it in that context, you go, oh, okay, yeah, people go back to abusive relationships. They go back to these people that they kind of deep down know are no good for them, but they're on the hook emotionally. And so they keep going down.
Is what you're saying that I might not actually be in an online relationship with Beyonce? Is that what you're trying
Oh
to say?
no, that's real. That's 100% real. She rang me before, and we were just talking about how great you were.
Yeah.
And you should definitely send her that cash.
You know, it's interesting, like to go down that route. I've heard stories of people who have gotten sort of it's not a scam, but there's people who do prey on people of this nature. Like they will prey on people who have an addiction to this type of I don't know, fetish or lifestyle, or and they'll just spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, like on these OnlyFans models and so forth. I've experienced this, these stories with people that have actually been around me. It's a very, very gnarly time, but like it's weird because like as evil as that is, you're preying on people with addiction. Not quite a scam, but not far out of the vein, don't you think?
Yeah, it's definitely scam adjacent. I think if someone is, if you have someone who feels like they're in a real relationship with you, and it is not a real relationship, it's kind of like a parasocial relationship, and then you take advantage of that, I feel like that's definitely crossing some ethical boundaries. In terms of whether it's a scam or not, I'm not sure that it is, because the person doing OnlyFans is pretty it's OnlyFans. People pretty upfront about what it is and what it's about. And you're saying, if you give me money, you will get this service, and you get the service. So it's sort of, it is definitely manipulative, but I think it's slightly different from a scam.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things out there where they prey upon these addictions or these sort of wants of people. Scotty P in the chat just mentioned, I had one where Chris Ramsey, famous magician Chris Ramsey, was going to send me a PlayStation 5. I just had to pay the postage. He hadn't fallen for it. I see this quite often. I actually are part of a couple of gaming groups and so forth through some sim racing that I do, and they'll say things to the effect of, I had this PlayStation, my son passed away. If anybody wants it, just let me know. And it's like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? You can just have it, is the idea. I'm just going to give it away, but you pay the postage. Like, it's a really interesting way to prey on people, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. And the great thing, I mean, choosing a PlayStation 5 is great because it is just expensive enough that it's got value to us where we want to leap on it, but it's not so expensive to maybe start hitting those red flags. It's just at that right price point of, I want this, but it's not so expensive that if I said, hey, look, my kid died so you can have my Ferrari, you're going to be suspicious. But if it was something that was a bit cheaper, you might, just go, don't worry about it. I don't want to pay the postage. I'm not interested. Also with the PlayStation 5, less so these days, but, we had a solid, is it like 12, 18 months when no one could get a PlayStation 5. Yeah. So it was this thing everybody wanted. Everybody wanted a PlayStation 5, and it wasn't even about the money, the financial value of it. It was just the scarcity. So it's PlayStation 5 is a good thing to offer.
That's so true. Yeah. And if I may, it happens in show business too. When we post a sold out poster for our show on the Theatre of Magic, people will comment on that going, hey, me and my husband can't go anymore. In case anyone wants to get our ticket, just message me. And we'll do a search, and that person is fake.
Kidding me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it happens quite, we have to patrol that quite often. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's happened to me a lot. Like I will post that it's a sold out show, and people instantly will come in and try and get the tickets. What is interesting though, is that when we post on social media, hey, the show is sold out, we're relying on exactly the same psychology in that we're going, hey, this show's sold out, which is everyone's go, this show's selling out. Well, I better buy tickets for it then, because suddenly you've got scarcity. So both the person making the post about their sold out show and the scammer are both relying on scarcity to try and make a buck.
Now we're getting into the good stuff. How do we scam people in the best way possible to buy tickets to our show? Is there a better way? Is there a guilt method? Is there a relationship, reel to pull them in? What should we be doing?
So this is a topic where I feel like if I pretend that I know what I'm talking about, I will be a scammer, I'll be conning you, because I have a massive amount of knowledge on how to sell tickets to shows, and I just don't do it. I just don't do the things that people should be doing to sell tickets to their shows. It's something that I don't do. The big thing. So one of the things though that in talking to producers who are successful, one of the big things is to have a show that is accessible to as many people as possible. Is to basically look at like removing as many of the barriers to entry as you possibly can for your audience, and only put in things which are specific about your show if you really know that it's going to affect the quality of the show. So if you've got a kid show, make sure it's clear that it's a kid show.
Right.
But this is a thing that, because I always like to do a themed magic show. So I want to do a magic show, and it's also about board games. It's a magic show, and it's also about neuroscience. And the problem is that you then have an audience of people who want to see a magic show, and you have an audience of people interested in neuroscience. But if you've got to get people who are in the middle of that Venn diagram to come see the show. So instead you say, come see the magic show. One of the shows that's really popular, these guys do really well in Australia, and they're just the greatest magic show. That's just what it's. Oh no, their names have just leapt out of my head, and they would beat me up. Now I've forgotten.
Justin Williams and Sam Hume.
Thank you. Sorry, Justin and Sam. And to me, that's brilliant. And when you look at their show, like the poster, they've got a picture of a guy who kind of looks like a magician. He's got a top hat, he's got a curly mustache, and you go, great, magician, let's go. And their show itself is not that exact. It's not their show is more specific than that, but they're not. What they're trying to say is, hey, this is a magic show. This is professional. This is good. You're gonna love it. Like you look at like the illusionists. It's literally just the illusionists. They're magicians. Come see them.
Yeah. Be specific.
So this is interesting because a lot of the things we're talking about are very modern day things. They're examples of cybersecurity issues and scams of that nature. But what I'm curious about is like, how far back does it go? You know what I mean? Like, scams have existed since the dawn of time. I don't know what the earliest sort of reported scam might be, but I imagine it would be things in the streets, things like the Monte and the so forth. Can we sort of explore the very beginnings of scams and maybe like where it came from the streets?
Yeah, sure. So things like the 3-card Monte and the shell game, they're old, but they're not as old as we would like people to think. There's always that thing about, there's hieroglyphics with people doing the cups and balls and pyramids, and it's like, no, there's not. That's not. I think that's baking is what they're doing. They've got they're like, it's actually bakers, but we like to pretend that these are much older. But the psychology of the scams goes back really far. You see the principles that are used in the scams are used over and over again. The advanced fee fraud, the idea like pay some money now and you'll get a reward later. You can see that going back throughout history. The Spanish prisoner is like a classic scam where people would approach their victims. Scammers would approach their victims in taverns in medieval times and say, there is a beautiful princess who's been kept prisoner in Spain, and we want to go and rescue her. We're going to go and mount a rescue operation. If you can invest in our operation, then you'll get money from the princess. And often the implication is that the princess will marry you as well, because we're going to bring her back here and all of her wealth. And people would pay money. And that is essentially exactly the same as the Nigerian scams, the Nigerian email scam of like, hey, I'm a Nigerian prince and I need to get some money out of Nigeria. It's exactly the same thing. So, even though the scams themselves might be newer than we think, the psychology just goes way back.
I think that to me sounds like the plot of like a Mario Brothers thing where it's like there's a princess and some guy at the bar who's just tripping balls on mushrooms. And then he's going like, yeah, man, I'm going to go and find this princess. And he stumbles out the bar, falls into a pond and fights a turtle thinking it's Bowser. That's where my comedy brain goes immediately.
Totally. But like, it's the reason why it's the scam and the reason why it's in Mario and the reason why it's like the plot of, like 100 movies. It's like these classic archetypes, these
Hmm.
classic stories that we tell over and over and over again. And when you take those stories and you put it into a scam, it's like people's brains go, bing, yes, I like that story. I want to be the hero of the story who rescues the princess.
Was the Cups and Balls originally a type of Monte-esque, scamming game, or was it always Cups and Balls?
I don't look. I don't know. I'm sure there's a magic historian would have a better idea than me. I do know that the cups and that buskers doing Cups and Balls variations were linked with con artists scamming people on the street, from pretty much as soon as they popped up. There's a very famous painting of someone doing the Cups and Balls, and the audience member is leaning in, staring really, closely, utterly amazed. And if you look closely, you can see someone in the crowd is picking their pocket at the same time. So it's sort of this, the two are definitely linked. But as far as the actual history, like they are really quite different effects, even though they do use three objects. It's different methodology, and it's not necessarily as linked as I think it might be. But I reckon there's a magic historian out there who'd have a better idea than me.
Where's Doug when you need him?
Yeah. Now, as far as like street scams go, the three that come to mind for me would be like the 3-card money, in which you would have, let's say, a money card would be represented by, like, let's say a diamond, ace of diamonds, and 2 black indifferent cards, like 2 court cards. You mix them up and you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting it correct. And should you do that, you win some money. As well as that, there is the pea and shell, of which you have an amazing collection of shells, right, Nick? You have like hundreds of them.
Yeah.
So the pea and shell game, little pea under a walnut shell, mix it around, guess correctly, win some money. And then the more common known, which is the title of your second book, Fast and Loose, is one in which you put a chain in a particular pattern, and if you hold your finger down and remove the chain, it sticks to your finger. If it sticks to your finger, you win. I'd never seen that before. You showed me. How did you stumble across that one?
The Fast and Loose. So the reason why those 3 ones are ones that we've heard of is that they're 3 which are basically popular with magicians. That's really the reason why that we really know a lot about them. Fast and Loose is actually pretty obscure. I think I first heard about it from Whit Hayden. Here's the School for Scoundrels that he set up with Chef Anton, where they basically train people in these types of scams. And one of the things they do is Fast and Loose. But it's, as a magic effect, it's a frustrating one, because the audience just loses over and over and over and over again. There's not a lot of opportunities for storytelling or twists or turns. It's just, no matter what happens, you lose. You're an idiot. So it doesn't necessarily. It's much harder to structure a routine from. That one is a very, very old. It's a very, very old quote. And it's a very old name. In Shakespeare, someone mentions to play fast and loose with faith, which is like from Love's Labour's Lost. And when we say fast and loose and we're talking about the scam, it's not a reference to Shakespeare. Shakespeare's actually referencing the scam in the play. So when he says to play fast and loose with faith, it basically means to gamble, and also to gamble in a way in which you're probably going to lose.
Wow. So yeah, it's crazy that something like that existed way back in those times.
And there's a few variations. There's one with a belt where you sort of fold a belt. You fold a belt in half and then roll it up, and then you have to put your finger in one of the 2 loops that are in the middle, and you can basically choose who's going to win and who's going to lose. Yeah. Fast and Loose is one that shows up, a lot. But like with a lot of these types of both as magic routines and as scams, is that the methodology, so like how to get the pea from one shell to another, is pretty simple. How to swap the 2 cards, 2 cards in Fast and Loose, also quite simple. Fast and Loose to do it's all pretty simple. But what is hard is to get people to play the game and bet money, and that is actually the real that is the real trick of these. And in the case of magic, it's like, well, how do we take these and actually make them entertaining? That's the real challenge.
So when you talk about so that's a skill in itself, and I'm sure there's been people along the way. Is there any people that sort of come to mind who have been exceptional at being scammers? I mean, like, who would be your top 3 scammers of all time?
Oh, top 3 scammers, as in con artists. Look,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, look, the boring answer is that there's probably people who've just made millions in some financial scam, and they're kind of boring stories. And the people who we think of as the greatest scammers of all time, they're not people making millions of dollars, but they're people who've got good stories to tell. You know, there's so like Victor Lustig was a con artist, and he sold the Eiffel Tower on 2 separate occasions. So the Eiffel Tower was originally meant to be a temporary structure, was set up for a kind of World's Fair type deal, and people liked it, so it stayed. But some people are like, wait, this is this weird giant metal pyramid sticking up out of the middle of these beautiful buildings. No, let's get rid of it. And so he started to go into scrap dealers, saying he was a government official, and saying that it was going to be pulled down for scrap, and got them to bid. And then he found this one guy who kept who he thought, this guy's a bit dodgy. So he went up to this one particular guy and said, hey, I am just a government official. I don't make very much money, but, and basically hinted that he'd like a bribe. So this guy bribed Victor Lustig. He said, okay, you've got the contract. Then he took the money off the guy as well for the job. And then this guy showed up to try and pull down the Eiffel Tower. And he was so embarrassed, he didn't tell anyone about it. And so Victor Lustig skipped town, realized it didn't make the papers, went, oh, okay. So he came back and did it again. Pulled it to do the second time. Which is why, it's why it's so great that you're willing to kind of tell that story about just missing out on being scammed, because con artists rely on the fact that we keep that stuff a secret.
True.
But that said, Victor Lustig, yeah, sure, he made a lot of money, but the reason why we think of him as a great is because he's got a cool story. And that's why Frank Abagnale, the Catch Me If You Can guy, that's why he is so famous, is because he could tell these really incredible stories. The scams themselves were, the scams themselves were non-existent. He everything that is in that movie is lies. None of it happened. All the stuff that is in his book, all a pack of lies. He made it all up. The scams he was actually pulling were small scale frauds of his friends and family. Just real small scale, sleazy, manipulative bullshit. But he wrote a memoir where he's this dashing, charismatic, guy who's jet setting around the world, taking down multinational companies, and makes a great movie. But he's just full of it.
Wow. That's, I guess, like a liar lies, right?
It is, yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you get a lot of people who present themselves as being reformed con artists, and you find that often what they're saying isn't true. They may well be con artists, but they'll then present themselves as they'll then create a mythology for themselves, and then they'll write memoirs and give TED Talks and all this sort of stuff about their time as a con artist and a swindler. And they'll start giving advice that isn't actually good advice, but it's just advice that helps reinforce the mythos. And some of them end up going back to prison again. There's a guy, Barry Minkow, who scammed a whole bunch of people in the 80s, set up this this cleaning company, and basically, through complicated means, became very, very rich by getting investors and not doing anything. Went to prison, came out, became a preacher, turned his life around, started talking about the dangers of becoming a con artist and why he got sucked in, and and how God had changed his life, and then ended up defrauding all of the people in his church.
No.
Went back to prison again. So a lot of these guys who the reformed con artist are not quite it's not that they're still committing crimes, but the type of person who becomes a con artist in the first place isn't necessarily the person you want to go to for advice.
Yeah. Pro tip.
Jordan Belfort, straight line system.
Yeah. Well, it's fun because Johnson and I, we used to catch up regularly over coffees and so forth. And one time Johnson scammed me, and I got to share this just for the sake of fun stories because it leads into another. I was like, cool, man, I got to get going. I'm like, cool, you head off. I got to take care of some biz. Johnson takes off. Then I go to pay my bill, and it's like, oh, cool. So you're having this and the raisin toast, and I'm like, scammer. Johnson didn't pay for his raisin toast. Left me to pay it. Trust the con man to stitch me into paying for his raisin toast. This son of a bitch. So I was like, I actually went like, damn, he's good when that happened. But
I did that to I did that to a friend a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about we're just sort of talking about, oh, you know that weird thing when when people really argue over who's paying. We're going back and forth. You know that thing where like we're gonna sort of just and then there's this big fight. And it's really awkward. And he goes, yeah, I hate that. Blah blah blah. Yeah, me too. And I go, oh, and then later on I go, oh, actually, can I, like, when we go to pay at the counter, can I just try? Can I just try something? And he goes, yeah. And I go, cool. And so we go up to the counter, and she goes, now are you guys splitting this? And my friend, like Pablo, he kind of looks at me, expected, because I wanted to try something, and I go, no, Pablo's paying, and then just walked off. And he was so like, wait, what just happened? And he couldn't, there was nothing, he just didn't have it in him to argue. He just paid the bill.
That's great. But one of the stories that you shared was this amazing story about a truck and watermelons. It was a really cool story. Could you share that with our audience?
Oh yeah, this is Titanic Thompson. Titanic Thompson was a famous con artist who was, and also like a poker player, but he made his money mostly from small scale scams, and it was usually proposition wagers, so like side bets. And he would come up with these little what seemed like really small scams, but there were actually things that were going to end up making him a lot of money. So he was basically a road gambler. And so he would do things like he once bet, he was like a golfer, and he once bet someone that he could drive a golf ball 500 yards using like a wooden club. So like at the time, like if you had like a really good driver, you could get like 200 yards. So this was impossible. So he made this bet with someone, and then he went outside and drove the ball over a frozen lake. So the ball just kept bouncing until it had gone 500 yards and won the bet. So he did that kind of thing. But the watermelons was essentially, he was just sitting outside with this guy, and this watermelon truck kind of pulled up in front of them, and he just went 187. And the guy says, what's that? And he goes, that's how many watermelons there are, 187. And he goes, there's not 187 watermelons. You can't know that. He goes, no, it is 187 watermelons. And they keep arguing about it. And eventually goes, fine, I'll bet you. And he bets this crazy amount of money that this is what it's going to, like like $500. And this is like 100 years ago. And so they go and they pay the watermelon driver. They say, we want to count your watermelons. Here's $5. Let us count your watermelons. And he goes, I think they agree that it's got to be within 5. And so it turns out there are 186 watermelons. He's off by 1, and he wins the bet. And it turns out that he knew that guy sat on that bench every day, and he knew that guy was a gambler. And so he paid someone to drive a watermelon truck up around the streets and wait for the guy, and then made the bet. So the whole thing was set up. Set up the watermelon truck. He set the whole thing up. But to the guy who was sitting there, this was just a small scale scam. And the cost, you think, that is not actually that much. If there's a guy, watermelon, truck guy, deliverer, you say, hey, can you drive your watermelon truck and just park it here for me? And then we'll count the watermelons, and I'll pay you $10. So he's risking $10, and the reward is, however much you can convince him to take the bet.
Damn.
Isn't it great when you can orchestrate things like that? Like, that is just
that's a magic trick,
Yes.
Yeah.
And like with magic, I think that a lot of the time people fall for the trick because they underestimate how much effort we're willing to go to create, like, to do something that's kind of dumb. You've got I've spent ages and ages, I've spent years practicing this particular move just to make it look like a coin's disappeared. Like people really underestimate how much effort we're willing to go to.
100%.
Casino seems to be one of those locations in which they're constantly trying to crack down on gamblers and scammers or anything of that nature. Is there anything in your memory or knowledge that has been successful as far as scams in casinos or heists?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. There's a huge number of them and they go on all the time, but the casinos keep it quiet. There was one here at Crown Casino where it was in the private blackjack room and involved one of the whales. And the whale was essentially in cahoots with someone who was on staff at the casino, who was essentially, they were using the casino's security system and using sort of information that was gathered from security cameras, which the person working at the casino had, which was then being fed to the whale, and they won this crazy amount of money.
Wow.
And the whale actually got basically kicked out of the country in the middle of the night, and the whole thing would have just been smoothed over, except the casino the next morning had this media event, which was the world's most expensive cocktail. And this guy was going to buy the world's most expensive cocktail and get his face in the his picture in the paper.
Wow.
But when the reporters all showed up, it was a different guy. It was some other guy. And one of the reporters said, "Hey, wasn't it supposed to be this other guy?" And this guy said, "Oh yeah, there was something happened with the other guy, and he got kicked out." Just off, some offhand remark, which meant the newspapers then went, "Oh, there's a story here," and went and uncovered what actually happened.
Wow.
But none of that would have come out if it wasn't for this situation.
I had no idea.
Wow. I'm just curious now about this cocktail. Is it the most expensive cocktail because it's the thing where it costs $1,000, but it comes with a room for the night? Like, is it that kind of, because I know some places would do that. You buy this cocktail. Someone told me the story of a speed dating event that happens at a hotel, and the way you get around getting a room, if you really find someone you click with at this speed dating, is you order this particular cocktail, and it costs $900, but it also comes with a room that they just give you when you buy the cocktail.
Yeah. So this one was, I think that it was, in this situation, it was a publicity stunt. And so it was called the Winston, I think. And it was this very expensive, it had just, 1858 cognac, that kind of thing, just a whole bunch of expensive stuff thrown in there. And then it was essentially this guy was going to, his name is James Manning, was going to buy this cocktail essentially as a publicity stunt. And it was like, it was like $15,000 he was going to pay for it. The reason why it was $15,000 was because that was the price that they had put on the cocktail, so they could call it the world's most expensive cocktail.
Oh, wow.
And then the whole thing fell apart when they had to sort of fake it the next day with a different guy because Manning hadn't shown up. Wasn't there anymore. So it's it was really just a sort of publicity stunt. But that idea of what you're talking about, of like you're buying one thing, but you get this other thing for free. Like you see that in, I believe it happens in Japan, where you'll play a game. It would be illegal to gamble, but you can play a game and win a prize. And so you pay a game, and then you win, say, a bar of soap. And then luckily there just happens to be a shop next door that will buy the soap from you for an extra for $100.
Exactly. Also, I found the article online, so it doesn't look like much right this second, but this is the Winston cocktail.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And if you type that in, most expensive cocktail called the Winston, it comes up with that story from Melbourne. And just quickly, the most expensive cocktail was sold for $12,970 and was made by Jeff Heffernan in Australia at Club 23 in Melbourne in 2013, and it was called the Winston. Contained 60 mils of Croisets, 1858 cognac, and it made it into the Guinness Book of Records. So,
Okay.
that's kind of cool as a way to promote, is to get the thing in the Guinness Book of Records. That's definitely one way to do it.
So the interesting thing is that, like, for the past 40 minutes, we've been talking about scams, and they're basically done in a very negative notion. They're done to either deceive or steal or con people out of their money. I'm really curious if there's any stories where scams have been used for good, and are there many of those stories?
Well, no, not really. I mean, ultimately, when you scam someone, you're deceiving someone in order to make a profit. To take that.
So the Catholic Church. Now, just kidding, everyone. Just kidding.
Well, yeah. I mean, okay. So that's it. The idea is just we have this idea in movies where you'll have, say, like a movie like The Sting, where they will say, okay, we want to make the con artists the heroes, so we'll make sure that the victim deserves it. So we'll say, we'll pick this guy, and this guy deserves to be scammed, and he is, but he's still ultimately the victim of a crime. Like, and so to sort of say, like, oh, this guy deserved it, therefore it's a good thing, I would say it's satisfying, but it's basically like revenge. A revenge scam would be like the closest to a good scam. The other thing to remember, I think, is that the people doing the scamming will say, well, every scam is a good scam because we got paid, from their perception. And they will often have justifications for why they do it. When you talk about, say, some of the scammers in Africa, they will have built into the culture of scamming, they will essentially say that people from the West have been coming to Africa for hundreds of years. They have the reason why a lot of African countries have such poor economies is because of colonialism. It is because of the action of Western, corporations coming in and, removing the natural resources and destroying the country and making it unstable. And so us scamming Westerners essentially is revenge. It's restoring the balance. It's getting the money that was taken out of Africa and bringing it back again. So from their perspective, not only are they making money, they are righting the wrongs of the past. They're righting the wrongs of history. Now, whether that's like makes it okay or not is a different question. But from their perspective, they're good. They're the good guys.
That's really interesting. Like, yeah, I just thought that if there was any kind of story, it's like, well, these guys scammed the corporation out of their money back in order to be able to help their community, whatever it might be.
That's right.
They beat them at their own game. Like, that would be, how that one would sort of unfold.
Yeah. Just noticed someone in the comments asked about Operation Mincemeat and whether that was a positive scam. That was that was during World War II when I think the Allies got a homeless guy and dressed him up as a soldier with some fake plans. He was a dead guy, a guy who died. And so they got the body and dressed him up so he looked like a soldier and put some fake plans, in his satchel, and then made sure the body washed up at shore. And then they essentially used the plans to try and to spread misinformation. I don't think that is necessary. It's deception, obviously, but it's not necessarily a scam because profit is not it's not about the financial profit. It's more about, deception, in the case of war.
Like war games. Yeah.
Yeah, it's war games. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we reference some of the things that happened in the World War in the episode we did, episode 187 on Jasper Masculine, in which during that time they were doing a lot of just covert sort of ideas where they would emulate inflatable tanks and dress up trucks and tanks as just normal supply trucks, and just that level of misdirection. Like, there was quite an interesting level, but I had no idea that they were using like corpses, to misdirect. And it's an amazing way of thinking, right? It's the reason I bring that up is that, like, from the conversations we had earlier, you think about the psychology of the people who are taking advantage of these folks in scams, and you kind of look at them and go, oh, they're narcissistic. But then when someone has a mind that goes, let's put plans on a corpse and see what happens, I don't know what to call that person. I don't know if narcissistic, like, I wouldn't call them a narcissist or a genius. Like, I don't know.
It's a weird type of genius.
It's a weird type of genius. Like,
Yeah.
You know that the sickos are going to examine that soldier's body for clues, and they're going to find a clue that we planted. Like, it's like the way that magicians will pretend to palm a card in the hopes that they will go, I know how you did the trick now. It's in your hand. And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Like, though, you think about it with magicians, like, I remember sitting in a lecture where the magician who was lecturing spent 10 minutes talking about, so you've got the coin is in your hand, or they think the coin is in your hand, and now you're going to open your hand and you're going to show that the coin isn't there. And he spent like 10 minutes talking about all the different ways in which someone might open their hand to show the coin isn't there to make it as effective as possible. And everyone was like, this is very interesting. Like, you never sort of open your hand fully up. You always sort of go like one finger at it, you unravel your fingers a little bit, or do you sort of open it towards yourself and then turn your hand, or, all of those different types of things that we, put all that effort into. So I think it's the same here. It's just thinking about, people think about the details. They think about, exactly how this is going to work out.
Nick, I think we should do a gig story. How do you feel about that?
Feel great.
Sure.
So Gig Stories is a part of the show we like to talk about magic moments or even con man moments, either while performing or our day-to-day lives, starting with the story from our guest, Mr. Nicholas J. Johnson.
All right. I did a gig. So I got hired to do a gig for at a function room at Parliament House. So this is in Victoria. So this is like state government, and it was close to election time. It was close to budget time, which meant security is quite heightened. And I had not really thought about what I was, what was in my bag. And so I took my magic kit and I stopped at security, and they opened it up, and it was full of like knives, fake money, like a hammer, nails, like all of this sort of stuff. And they were like, okay, what are you doing? I go, I'm a magician. And the security was like, okay, well, what are you doing? And like, I was going to do a magic show, and these are my props. Oh, okay. And eventually they said, you can't take the money in. So you can't take the knife in.
Okay.
And I go, oh, okay, that's all right. Because it's like, there's knives in there. That's fine. I'll just collect on my way out. And they go, yeah, I'm not sure you'll be able to do that. And I go, oh, well, that's okay. It's a cheap knife. Whatever. I understand. And so I go and I do the gig, and I come back out. And when I come back out, the federal police are waiting for me.
Oh, wow.
And I have to explain to them exactly what every prop is. So essentially, I've just finished the show, and I have to go and do the show again for the federal police, and it's stuff like, I do the human blockhead, so hammering a nail into my face, and, like I'm doing this like really weird stuff. And they're not entertained. They're just, right, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? And just one thing after the other. And at the end, they just basically went, okay, you can go. And that was it. And it was like, from their perspective, it was literally like, this guy has to demonstrate how he uses all of these things, because you can't take things into Parliament House if you don't have a reason to bring them in. So I had to demonstrate each object one by one. They did not care I was a magician. They did not care about the performance. All they cared about is that I could demonstrate what I was doing. And then I got to go home. But what was crazy was I did have essentially fake money that was probably illegal. But because from their perspective, they weren't thinking about that crime. Just they're like, well, what are you doing with it? And I go, magic tricks. And they go, okay, that's fine. Off you go.
Bloody hell. Literally performing for your life.
Yes, that's right.
Holy crap. All right.
I also
that's
had one where I had the opposite situation, which was, instead of showing up to a gig and having all this stuff that I didn't kind of really think about having, I showed up. It was a kid's show, and I showed up to do a kid's show with my box of tricks, and it was like, those ones where you've got your box, you walk on stage, you put it down, you open it, and you just start. There's no setup. And the kids were all sitting there ready to go. So I just walk in, I put it down, I go, "Hey kids, you gonna have some fun? Great, let's start." And I open the box. No magic tricks. It was the wrong box.
No.
And it was just full of like random stuff that was not, it was just like paper, essentially, just random bits of paper. And I was on stage with literally no props at all. And I'd already started the show. And so I had to say, "Oh no, kids, it looks like I've forgotten all of my magic tricks. What are we going to do? Can you help me make some magic tricks?" And all the kids go, "Yay!" And it was in a classroom. So I was like walking around the classroom, picking up objects. And what do we need to do a magic show? And they say, "You need a magic wand." Okay. And so I get like a pen, a texter. That's going to be my magic wand. And like, this is going to be my hat. And I'm like, so I do like a cups and balls, and I do like some, some sort of Sharpie vanish type stuff, and fill like 50 minutes with this just pulled out of my backside magic show. And at the end, I went up to the client and said, "I'm so sorry about that. I'm really sorry. I was really unprofessional." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "What? I forgot all my magic." And she goes, "Oh, I thought that was just what you did. I thought that was just
the show."
She just thought that was my vibe, that I just show up and make, like, she was just like, "Yeah, that was cool that you just made up all those tricks with the stuff." And
wow,
wild, utterly wild.
Like Max Malini type stuff, where you just rock up with lint in your pockets and pull out a magic show. That's insane.
Yeah. I think for a kid's show, particularly when your character is like shambolic, like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing," and "Kids, can you help me?" If that's kind of your vibe, it's much easier to get away with, like to walk on stage as a mentalist, who's very serious, and to be like rummaging around in people's pockets for things to do magic tricks with, that's a bit more of a challenge.
Far out.
Yeah, that's true.
That's crazy.
I don't think I can top that, but I will just share a little anecdote from last week's shows. I noticed in my show, I get people to choose out of two bags. There's a bag that has A on it and a bag that has B on it, and there are genuinely two different routines in there, endings to a routine, and I let them choose. So this kid, I'm like, "Which bag will it be?" And he flicks. I see him like flicking an imaginary coin, put it on his wrist, and he goes, "B." And I'm like, that's a pretty good way to test which outcome you want. Are you sure? Do you want to change your mind? He's like, "Hang on, let me check." No. And by the way, like, why would a coin say A or B? Anyway, and I'm like, "Is that a legit coin? Let me see it." So this kid hocks over an imaginary coin, and I catch it and turn it into a real coin as if like, as a magician would. And the audience loses their mind because it's a completely off the cuff moment.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
Just a little, for us, it's nothing. It's like, "Oh yeah, just put a coin in Ramsey's subtlety. He throws it to you." But I tell you, the audience lost their mind at that. And then I just, shuttle past it and threw him back his invisible coin, and he caught it and did this and went and then kept going. And it was just a fun little nothing moment that I didn't even film it because I usually film every show. And it was just so beautiful. And then we just kept going with the show. But everyone just was like not expecting that surprise, I guess is what it really was, the surprise. That was a very fun little bit that happened.
That's cute.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's really fun.
I like when I like when kids yell, like they yell out things they want you to do and you can do it. Like they yell, and sometimes they yell out something they think is really dumb or silly, and they're like, a kid will go, "Make a frog appear in your mouth." And it's like, "Oh, you've got like a sponge frog sitting right there." And you're just like, "Okay," like they just lose their minds. It's such great. It's so beautiful, that idea. is it possible to manufacture those moments? Do you think? Are there ways in which you can sort of, lead an audience down a path and make them feel like they're seeing something special and unique that only ever happened today? Or, like, are there techniques, do you reckon, to kind of manufacture those moments?
Probably. I mean, there is one I do on my show, which is I ask them what card they want in the deck, and then I ask them what would be the most impressive way I can find it for you. And I do that in my show so that it just makes it fun for me, but also like I can film that part of the show every week and it's a new thing. but also it feels like what you're saying. It's a part of the show that no one ever sees because it depends on what they say in that moment. But realistically, people only say sort of 5 different things. But to them, it feels like it's the first time like that's ever happened. Because I'll obviously play it off like, oh my God, no one's ever said to make it be at the top of the deck or whatever. And I think the more you can incorporate that, the better. Absolutely. Like if I could have someone have an imaginary coin each time to like decide something, and in hindsight, maybe I should. But yeah, absolutely. That's when it becomes real magic.
Yeah, totally.
Seemingly.
Yeah, you can play that off. If I just said, like, I want you to imagine you're holding a coin, give it a flip, catch, put it on your wrist. It's going to be A or B. What do you see? And they go, A. Great. And throw me the cone. Thanks, man. And just put it in your pocket. Like, you could probably...
Well, I mean, you do that, Nick, right? With the card. Like, imagine you have a card and you fold it up and, you literally can do that already with...
yeah. I think sometimes... you can almost visually prompt people to say something. Like I do like I said before, I do the human blockhead. So you're hammering a nail in and then you pull it out with the back of the, like you pull it out with the claw.
Yeah.
And what I tend to do is I hammer it in and then I go to take it out with my hand. And then I sort of pause like it's stuck. And I'll just kind of pause for a second and then lift up the hammer just slightly because it's in my hand already. And 9 times out of 10, someone in the audience will shout out, use the claw. And I'll go, use the claw. And I go, okay. And then pull it out. And somehow that makes it more amazing and more disgusting and more incredible because it was like, just a loose thing that happened in the moment.
That's cute.
Yeah, those sort of little things. But it's just, it feels,
So Nick, what's your gig story? Do you have something?
I had a cute moment on Sunday. I was performing at a 60th birthday party, and it was great. It was a very private function at this beautiful restaurant, a lovely, lovely family. And I'm performing away, and there's kids there, and they kind of follow me from table to table. And I'm great with kids, so it's the type of thing where like they weren't eating or they weren't. I'm like, come on, kids, magic show, follow me. I bring them all back to the kids' table. I do some magic for them and go, look, you gotta finish your lunch. We're going to do any more magic, all right? Because I don't want to get in trouble. And I had this whole back and forth. And I'm doing that. And I got a great rapport with the kids. I'm only there for an hour. But I remember at the end of the day, this young boy, cute little fella, was just losing it. And I was in these sort of like, it was like a booth. And he was like trying to get out. But he was reaching his arms out towards me to pick him up. And he was just losing his mind. His mother ends up coming over and pulling him out of the booth. And the kid's still losing it with his arms outstretched to me. And she's like, what's up? And I go, I think he wants me to hold him. And she's like, here. Like, he didn't even think about it. Just went like, you take this. And I grabbed this kid, dead silence. Just stop crying. And I was like, all right, cool. I was just looking for a little walk. And then I put him back in the booth.
I guess you're my kid now.
Yeah. I was just sort of like, this is awesome. Like, I made a little friend today. Yeah, I just thought that was really cute because I don't know. I think I've held like a baby my whole life. Like I wouldn't even know what to do with it. You know what I mean? It's because I love kids, but just when they're running around and swearing, not when they're little bags of poop crying and just what's that? Wow. Oh, it's for you. Like,
Yeah.
But when they're running around and they're swearing and they got opinions and stuff like that, and they're like unreasonable, I enjoy them at that phase. That's for me when they're the most fun. When everything's got to be off the ground because they're going to reach for stuff, like I enjoy them at that level. So yeah, it's
when they're just this little eating poop factory. Thing in your pants. Yeah.
they're like larvae, you know what I mean? Before they become a butterfly or whatever. You're just sort of sitting there wrapped up with this kind of like bundle of poop.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
And then people say, nah, man, you got it wrong. That's when they're the best. And it's like, well, maybe I'll experience that someday when I become a dad. But like, yeah, but it was just a really cute moment. It was like the best part of my weekend, being able to make friends with this kid. Or the kid had a nice connection enough with me that he was like, I'm losing my mind. Help me. Like, I just thought that was really cute to have that with kids.
Really nice.
You know, I love those little moments where it's like, come on, kids. And one kid grabs you by the hand. It's like, come on, we're going to go to the table and you're going to play with us. And it's like, oh, I made a cute little friend, you know?
Scotty P says, I'm going to ship my turd burger of a 9-year-old to you as we speak.
Yeah.
That's Scotty T.
Yeah, we've hit the hour mark, but I had one more thing on my list that I wanted to ask you about, Nick, and it was this amazing product you released some years ago, which was your 3-disc Monte. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure. 3-disc Monte. So it's a variation of the 3-card Monte. It's the one that's actually still performed by scammers. It's the one, if you go particularly into Europe, you'll see people out on the street playing it. And so I spent quite a bit of time in Europe collecting hidden camera footage and then put together a documentary about it. So it explains not just the moves, but how the con artists work and all the different techniques they have for avoiding getting caught and so on. And then with a little routine for magicians. And so I released that about like a decade ago, and I still get people asking me about it and still wanting it. So I'm going to re-release that shortly. We're going to have it with a download option because, you know, that's now people tend to want that, as well as still the DVD, and you get a little set of the discs. I know there's some people selling the discs and they're very pretty.
Is it this kind of thing?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So you got
there's
3
a few
discs.
if you look up.
Yeah,
they're like black plastic discs with a white spot on one of them. There's a few people who sell them as a magic prop, and they're very pretty and they look very nice. The ones that I include are the ones, so the design is from a French guy who uses them on the street. So they're not a magic prop, they're the actual thing that is used on the street. So these aren't like the hand carved shell game things that are in my collection. These are the things that the con artists would actually use. So anyway, I'm setting all that up for digital download and getting the discs made as we speak.
Great. And that's going to be available on your website at some point?
Yeah, conman.com.au.
Heck yeah, that is in the link in the description. Nicholas's website, 100%. Check it out.
Well, guys, I mean, I don't know about you. I could talk to the cows come home. I've had the best time, but the hour is up. Mr. Nabito, is there anything we want to say before we wrap up and throw to the final word?
No, look, I just think between last week having Mario the Maker Magician and now having Nicholas J. Johnson, I just, hope you guys are absorbing all of this awesomeness that I've been absorbing. And hopefully now we are a little wiser to look out for these scams. And I think the best way to end this episode is by giving our guest the final word.
Important thing that I recently learned is don't touch people when you're performing without asking them first, because they really don't like it. Ask people before you touch them.
Thanks for listening. It's time for us to disappear now. But we'll see you again on the next episode of The Magic Guys.